Good afternoon, family. I want to thank you all for tuning in to our third of four Black Minds Matter conversations in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. We are the Institute for Urban Research. My name is Dr. Jeff Menzies. I am a research associate professor here at Morgan State University's Institute for Urban Research. And we are in for a phenomenal discussion today. I mean, we've gone hard the first 2 weeks. The first week we were joined by Dr. Hope Hill and Dr. Jules Harrell, both of Howard University, as well as my own colleague, Dr. Stacy Patton from Morgan State University. And we had a great conversation dealing with, we were just looking at trauma, social media, and its impact on your overall health and wellness. Our second week, we shifted gears and we focused on overall mental health and wellness. And we looked at some other perspectives of mental health and wellness. Our guests that week were none other than Supernova Islam, as well as Brother Yasir Rahotep of the Yoga Skills Method. And so, Supernova Islam, he is a wellness warrior out there on the front lines, battling. He once called himself the hip hop medicine man. So he joined us. And of course, Baba Yasir, he's been training in the yoga method skills for decades now. He actually takes people to various countries. He actually goes to various countries and teaches his method. And he's just a wonderful, wonderful brother. And those are both wellness warriors. This week, we're shifting gears yet again. And we're staying with our theme of wellness, of course, being that this is Mental Health Awareness Month. But what we want to talk about this week is something a little bit different. And it's what I feel is perhaps one of the most major contributions to our overall understanding of wellness and mental health as overall from an African perspective. And so we're talking about research and scholarship in Black and African psychology. And so today we'll be joined by none other than Dr. Erica McInnis. She's coming to us from overseas. She's across the pond in the UK. And then we'll be joined later on by none other than Dr. T. Owens Moore, who is a brother from right here in the US. He's the chair of psychology at Clark Atlanta University. And so see, we've got Dr. McInnis here with us. What's up, sis? How you doing? Welcome, welcome, welcome.
I'm good. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's an honor to see you again, sis. It's been a minute, huh?
It's been a while, yes.
Yeah, I mean, how many years ago was that? Because I know we met. It was just for a little background, y'all. I met Dr. McInnis. It was years ago. I received an email message. It said, you were coming across the pond to the United States, or you were already in the nation, but you were coming to visit, and you were reaching out to the Association of Black Psychologists, basically. Yeah. And so, how long ago was that, sis? That was good.
2016. I got a fellowship to go to the USA to study African psychology, Black psychology. And you were recommended to me as somebody who to link up with, to find out more about it. And I'm so grateful even now to the places that you took me to in Washington, DC. Do you remember when you took me to the museum? And we got to see kind of like the exhibition that was dedicated to Emmett Till. Yep. And then you took me to Zwadi, one of the shops with African artifacts. Right. Told me about your scholarship with Neely Fuller Jr. and meeting people like you really made the fellowship and really introduced me to some practical sides as well as some academic sides of African psychology. So thank you.
Well, it was my honor to host you, sis. I was glad that we were able to link up. I remember that day clearly. I mean, we were up at Adams Morgan. I think that's where their shop was. It was the bazaar.
Yes.
We went in there and we went downtown. And did we make it to the Masonic Temple?
Yes, we did. Yes,
that's right.
Yes.
We went down to the Masonic. That was the House of the Temple, is what they call that, and it's the headquarters for the Scottish Rites Masons. And so I had the opportunity to talk about all the African symbolism on the outside, and that was a full day.
It was.
That was a pretty full day. Well, I appreciate you being able to join us today. And I was sitting here trying to gather all of my books, and I don't know why I tried to gather all of my books about African and Black psychology, and I'm just not able to do that, but I tried. And so if I had a camera that pan, I would just start, just showing these stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks. It's just books for days about African and Black psychology. And, what I was going to do in the beginning, if I had time at the very beginning, I was just going to roll through and just kind of start naming these titles and just kind of giving a little bit of background on each and every one of them. But we're not going to be able to do that. So maybe in between time, I get a chance to run through some of these books. But one of the most important things I would like for us to be able to talk about and deal with in our conversation today is the importance of having scholarship and research being done from an African perspective, right? Because it's foundational to, because we're talking about the African worldview, and I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Edwin Nichols.
Oh yes, he's my Jegner. He's my
right.
mentor, Jegner. So yes.
And so Dr. Nichols is foundational in our understanding of worldview, and it's through his teaching that I've been able to clearly speak about why the African scholarship and literature from our perspective is so important, because we're talking about literally a different worldview, a different way of acknowledging what mental health is, right? Because your worldview is going to determine what health and illness actually are. Your worldview is going to determine how you define things, how you conceptualize, how do you interpret what it is that you're observing. And so when you understand, I see you got your Urugu on the shelf behind you. When you start understanding that there's a whole different worldview at play here, and that the worldview that we're ascribing to right now, because it's what's Western dominated, we might be looking at illness as wellness and wellness as illness. So that's why today's conversation is so important. And I was like, let me see if my sister can chime in, because you've got this boot camp going on, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You got so many of our scholars and esteemed practitioners, our frontline warriors that are going to be presenting practical workshops, to people globally. So sis, I know I said a lot, and that's kind of like a preface.
I just need to just to kind of like clear something that I can concentrate on you for the moment. Just a minute.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll just keep talking to you. When you're ready, just come on back in. And so,
I'm ready now. Okay.
You're ready now.
Can I tell you about my boot camp series?
Say it again.
Can I tell you about my boot camp series that I'm putting together?
Oh yeah. Let's get to that. But I want you to let's most foundational talk. Let's talk about why it is that African scholarship and research is so important. You just recently published a chapter in a book, right?
Yes.
About racism and psychology. So speak a little bit about why this is important, why this conversation is necessary.
The thing is though, I think it's Dr. Wade Nobles and also Henry Clark talked about how when it was colonized, the world was colonized by Europeans, even thought how we think about things was colonized. So we think about things from a Western perspective, and then African psychology becomes the other, the non-European, everything is othered. But if we're really to feel a sense of wellness, a sense that we belong, a sense that we have contributed and we can contribute in the future, we really need to embrace the culture that we were part of developing, and that reflects our outlook, how we look at things. And it needs to be made accessible to different generations. So the scholars that I've kind of got on my bootcamp series, they were very good at doing the foundational work, but people like me and you need to reinterpret it for another generation. And the article that I recently had published in a book was talking about how we can even see it as the virus of there's the twin pandemics. You've got the virus of COVID-19, but also the virus of systemic white supremacy. And I'm not the first to consider it in those terms, but applying it to the COVID-19 to say that it's something that is worldwide, it's pervasive, it's difficult to hide from it. You can get a respite from it, but it's actually kind of like it's there all the time. So we need to really put it in writing that when people have experiences and then they want to be able to get some validation for it, they can see that it's written there. It is an entity. It actually exists. And they can feel a sense of, okay, if other people have experienced it, then I don't feel so alone with it. And if we also write about potential solutions, strategies that we found are helpful, and reinterpret it for the modern day person as well, then what we're doing is we're leaving it a blueprint, a bit like the ancient Egyptians did. I'm looking at the backdrop that you've got behind us, and how the ancient Egyptians, how they wrote on the walls a blueprint for us in how to live, how to live, how to die, what happens afterwards. And it's the same thing that we can do for our generation. We can write down the tools that have helped us, the strategies, the tactics, and then when the next generation they come along, they're not as flawed by it, they're not as kind of like overwhelmed by it. They, to some extent, they can be a bit prepared for it, and we can even get to the stage where we're resilient to it and anti-fragile to it.
Gotcha. And so, you bring up the ancient Egyptians, and I got some of those books up here too somewhere.
Oh, right.
It's crazy. So, for example, The Medunetter Volume 1. To me, this
Yes.
is a Black African psychology textbook. We've got the Book of the Dead.
Yes.
The Egyptian Heaven and Hell. And the reason why I cite these particular texts when talking about African and Black psychology is because the definition of psychology is actually the study of the soul. Right. Yes. And when we look at that concept of psychology literally being the study of the soul, then the one true form of psychology that we can embrace is the African worldview psychology. Okay. Because it's not just simply talking about the tangible aspects of psychology, the brain and, the observable behaviors, but it's actually talking about the soul that's beneath that. And so it's so important, as you point out, that our ancestors have been writing this literally on the walls, for centuries, millennia even, and that we have this rich heritage of psychological scholarship that we must embrace. But if we don't understand what this worldview is, then we cannot see the scriptures as psychological texts that are worthy. And then the other part that I thought about when you were speaking, sis, is that, because African psychology, Black psychology is othered. And I'm really going to get into this discussion more deeply when Dr. Moore joins us. He's the chair of psychology down at Clark Atlanta, and he's the melanin scholar, T. Owens Moore. Well, being a chair of psychology, I teach in psychology departments. I've only taught at HBCUs. I've only attended HBCUs. And it seems like our scholarship is always supplemental, right? It's always what we got to bring in addition to the main text. And that main text happens to be from the Western perspective. I taught theories of personality this semester, real quick, for example. And I always show them at the beginning that, the personality theories that we're going to be talking about. There's like page 3 in the book. And all around the borders are pictures of them. And I say, students, what's wrong with this picture? I don't even say what's wrong because I would be biasing them. Tell me what you see in this picture. And, I scanned it, I put it up on the projector screen. And invariably they say they're all white. And I say, and what else? They're all men. And what else? They're all old. And what else? They're not us. Exactly. And then I point out the one white woman that's in that lineup. Her name is Karen Horney, right? And she came with the feminist psychology, but then I have to bring in teacher theories of personality. I have to bring in Cambone as a supplement, but that's a supplement, even though one of my colleagues has articles with Dr. Cambone. She teaches in a department at Morgan as well, but she has articles with Dr. Cambone, but I have to bring her articles in as supplemental text, to the Western. And so, it's very, very disheartening that that's where we are, right? But I'm with you, and I share that sense of optimism. Here's a Cambone text that I use for my class, actually, and it's hard to come across also, but it's disheartening, but I'm also encouraged because there are so many of us that are willing to continue and carry this banner. Now, you've set up this wonderful boot camp series, and it's full of these scholars. I mean, I'm reading the list, and I'm like, yo, her, him, her, them. And, you've got past presidents of the Association of Black Psychologists. You've got the optimal psychologist, the Dr. Linda James Myers in the lineup. I mean, you've got Baba Wade Nobles. I mean, you've got this thing jam packed. So tell us about why you decided to do the boot camp and what people can expect.
Well, the reason why I decided to do it is that what we find is that we go to the conference, the Association of Black Psychologists conference every year, and you get 3 days or 4 days of absolute nourishment and fulfillment, and you feel good about yourself. But then you go back out invariably into the white world, and it kind of like drains, and you have to then wait another year to go back to get topped up again. So for me, it's about how can we keep our spirit going throughout the year, because we're facing things, particularly as we're facing the pandemic, and a lot of us can't even get to socialize with people. So how do we keep ourselves going? And then when I thought about it, I thought, who are the people when I go to the conference that I really get the most nourishment from? And who can we actually expose other people, particularly in the UK, but also in the USA, who may not get the chance to go to the conference, but may get the chance to, in the evening, do an online course, or even to kind of like, if it's recorded, then they can watch it at their leisure. Who is it that I really find resonates with me and I learn a lot from and is very foundational, and the people that we can then take in the knowledge and then we can go and we can add to it or work with it or really absorb it. So those are the people that I really, really focused on. And it's about how do we even make it in a contemporary sense, because even if we're thinking back to the ancient Egyptians, each dynasty had their own particular slant on things, had their own way of making things relevant to the culture of that day. And we're in the culture of short attention spans, tweets. People sometimes can't really tolerate kind of like a 4-hour workshop, but they may be able to tolerate a 1.5-hour workshop if it's got some interactive bits in it, if it's got some breaks, if it's got different forms of media. So there may be like a video, as well as some discussion, as well as some formal lecturing. So, and also people need to look after their wellness as well, because I've been to African psychology events, which I love and I find brilliant for the soul, but I can sometimes feel really tired afterwards because I've just been so energized that I've actually even burnt myself out. So it's about how do we put wellness in there in terms of meditations, and there's a wellness center which has got meditations in it that people can help to revive their spirit, because in the spirit of African psychology, something can be exciting and draining at the same time. So that's why I came up with the idea of putting it together as a boot camp series. And when you go to the conference, the Association of Black Psychology conference, sometimes you only get an hour from somebody, or if you're lucky, maybe a 2-hour workshop. So what I came up with was the idea of having modules. So a module is 3 weeks, so over 3 weeks they can build on it, and you can really get the detail that you want to get, and even look at how you can apply things.
Let me jump in. So tell us about the people that are there and some of the perspectives that they'll be sharing, the scholarship, because we want to focus on that. So, boot camp is great, give people the website for it, but what are they going to get? Who are the scholars that are coming to the table, and what is it that they're going to be serving up? It's phenomenal lineup.
All right. Well, we've got Dr. Linda James Myers, as you said. So she's going to be serving up about optimal theory and optimal
I got the book
psychology.
somewhere.
Yes, yeah. So it's going to be about how do we kind of like see ourselves, rather than being suboptimal, how do we try and make ourselves more spiritual? And when we're from a Eurocentric perspective, it's often quite materialistic, but how do we really tap into an African-centered way of being? So we've got Dr. Wade Nobles, who's
so real quick. So Dr. Linda James Myers, the optimal theory.
Yes.
I'm gonna jump in with each one.
Good. Yes.
And so when we're looking at what Dr. Myers presents, the suboptimal stance is almost synonymous with the Western worldview. And she's talking about what the optimal perspective is globally. And then when I'm teaching my students, I'm trying to let them know that, this is more than just the African-centered worldview. It's more than that. It's actually universally applicable. And if you measure it against, the Western worldview, which is fragmented, which could be limited, which could be based upon only the solid, tangible aspects of reality, when you look at the African worldview, it allows room for, the non-tangible reality to come to play as well. And when you can get that holistic perspective, that is actually an optimal way of living. That is actually the optimal way of functioning in the world. And so what Dr. Myers has done in such a beautiful and elegant way is she's put this forward for us to say, this is suboptimal living. This is optimal living. You want to get as close as possible to living optimally, as opposed to existing in this suboptimal state. Real quick story about Dr. Myers. I was driving in DC one day. I was driving down the street, matter of fact. Did a double take. I said, wait a minute. Backed up, hit reverse. I said, Dr. Myers, we don't jump in his car. And that was actually the first time I met her. And, we had a great conversation. She had a son that was in DC at the time. So from there, we began to build more. And I brought her to Fisk for a conference as well. So that's Dr. Myers. You got Wade Nobles.
Yes. So Dr. Wade Nobles, he's doing about the paradigm shift. Yes. Yeah. So he's going to be kind of like taking us through about how we can, how we need to really shift our paradigm, and even from being psychologists, to kind of like be people who are illuminators of the soul. Yeah. So we've also got Dr. Jermaine Robertson talking about the cultural misorientation scale. So about how when it comes to, it links with the optimal theory, in terms of living optimally, how would we know if we were doing it, and how would we know if we were doing it well? If I was accused of being African, would I be guilty as charged? So there are psychometric scales that I developed, and he's going to take us through with the boot camp of the nature of the measure and how to administer it.
So what is cultural misorientation? I've seen Dr. Owens Wilson, for example. He's got a phenomenal text called The Falsification of African Consciousness.
Oh, yes.
I've seen Dr. Cambone speak about cultural misorientation. So tell us a little bit about what that is and what we could, what is that about?
Yeah, it's about really saying that as Black people, sometimes we're orientated against ourselves, and sometimes we're not even working in our own best interests. Yeah, we've been socialized to sometimes prefer whiteness over Blackness, and to think that the white man or the white woman's ice is colder than the Black woman or man's ice. Yeah, so we don't support each other. So sometimes we are alien to ourselves, sometimes we are anti ourselves, sometimes we don't even know ourselves, that type of thing. Yeah,
sounds like you're talking some of that Dr. Akbar there, that
yes,
anti-self and alien self-disorder. Come on, man. See,
yes,
this is what I'm talking about. It's like our scholarship is vast.
yeah.
Our conceptualization of reality is vast. And we've had people who have blazed the trail for us to be able to walk relatively smoothly as we go into this future. And so cultural misorientation, you said that sometimes people are oriented, not oriented, or oriented against their own well-being, which meaning that they can actually be oriented to do damage to themselves and their culture, can be oriented to see themselves and their culture as being something negative, and therefore they run as fast as they can, as far away as they can from that orientation.
Yes.
And as we both notice, that that's not just a passive process that takes place. Like, people will intentionally establish institutions and systems, including systems of education, that are designed to culturally misorient you, to facilitate the development of anti and alien self disorders, right? And when you get a person to that level, as Dr. Carter G. Woodson said, you don't have to worry about what they do. Once you control a man's thinking, you know, you don't have to worry about their actions. He said it in this book right here, The Miseducation of the Negro. Again, this is an African psychology text. Anyway, sis, who else you got? We could do this all day.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the schedule here. So let me just pull it up. So we've also got what is wellness for Africans. So kind of like, so we've got Dr. Wilson. He's talking about wellness. Because we've got to really start off with the orientation child, Dr. Derek Wilson. What is wellness for African ancestry? Because if we're going to say that Europeans can sometimes see us as deficient and have a deficit model when it comes to us, well, we need to actually have our own sense of what is wellness for us. Because what we're not going to do is just say that, oh, well, everything about Black people is wonderful. Because that doesn't help us, because it doesn't help root out when we are doing things that aren't helping ourselves, or when people are operating in ways that damage our community. So we've got to have some sort of yardstick. And what we're not saying that there shouldn't be a yardstick. What we're saying is that the Eurocentric yardstick sometimes misunderstands us and misrepresents our wellness as actual illness. And if we follow it without having an alternative, we can sometimes be misorientated to ourselves. So we've got
two giants in that respect. Dr. Laila Africa, he wrote this handbook for raising Black children. Laila Africa. And then also, of course, our dear Queen Afua. You know, when you're talking about using our own yardsticks to measure our concept of wellness, you know, I had her son Supernova Islam on with me last week. And you know, Islam, he just redid Man Heal Thyself. And so, again, we have to have that orientation, because what happens, we got what is the book? Medical Apartheid, you know, is that by Harriet Washington? You know, it has the book Medical Apartheid, and that's exactly, it's talking about not only the use of standards and measurements that doesn't necessarily apply to us, because we're not necessarily in that normative population, but also how it can actually be used intentionally to perpetuate diseases in certain populations, mental as well as physical diseases. And if you've got that psychological misorientation, you're most likely to also be physically misorientated against yourself. Phenomenal.
So we've also got Dr. Edwin Nichols, as you mentioned before. He's going to be doing our philosophical aspects of cultural difference, and that's quite early in the program because it's quite foundational, and you're going to have 3 weeks to really be able to explore that. And what he does is he goes into the different characteristics of the different racial groups, Arabs, African American, Native Americans, Europeans, and you know, and people of African ancestry, and how our experiences have shaped us. And what I find is when I listen to his work, and every time I listen to his work, it gives me a clearer understanding of what's happening in the world around me, because I can think to say that, okay, then people who are sensitized to the deadline, they're people who are going to be very time orientated, even if you miss the spirit So if you come to a meeting late from a Eurocentric perspective, you may be penalized because you're late, you didn't arrive at a certain time on the clock. But from an African-centered perspective, you may arrive a few moments late, but if what you contribute to the meeting is actually of high value, then that is the most important thing, is what you bring, not necessarily what the time says on the clock. You know, of course, we've got to say things within reasonable limits, but he helps us understand how the culture has developed to be what it is, and how from that the kind of norms of different cultural groups are.
Right. And so that's the whole conversation about worldview, right? That's the big title for his worldview discussion. And he's the first person I've ever heard talk about. He's the one that gave me, well, him through Dr. Joy DeGruy,
Yes.
post-traumatic slave syndrome. She's the one that mentioned Dr. Nichols to me for the first time. And then I got to DC and I actually met and got a chance to break bread and really become really good with Dr. Nichols there. But it's like, when he talks about that whole CPT time, he's the one that gave me the understanding behind what that actually means, right? And that whole time orientation piece that you were just speaking about. And it's really slick because Dr. Wilson, he also talks about that in the falsification of African consciousness, where he talks about how your time orientation can actually be manipulated. And he cited a magazine called Omni Magazine, OMNI. And, he gives about a couple of paragraphs to it, but I'm the type of researcher, I'm gonna go find this primary resource. So I actually got my hands on this magazine and I read the article itself, but he talked about how you can manipulate a person's time orientation and change their current personality. And so if you make them feel that their presence is doomed, then they manifest a certain personality. They were hypnotizing these people. If you put somebody under hypnosis and gave them a post-hypnotic suggestion about their future being doomed, then they wake up with a certain personality, and it goes on and on for like different time orientations. But what Dr. Nichols is putting, the spin he puts on that is, like you said, how do we see time? Some people see it very linearly, right? Linearly, so that's, this time will never come again, it's done. Then you got people that see time in a circular orientation where this time is going to come back around. But then what I found to be the most healthiest and I guess the most empowering perspective is when you combine the linear to the circular. And when I'm talking about students, I said, so what do you get when you combine a circle and a straight line? You get that spiral.
Yes.
And so, now you have a time orientation that says, it's linear. And so you do need to value this minute and the next minute because you will not get those again. But understand, because time does move forward and it is simultaneously circular, then you would get another opportunity, although this one will have passed you, right? And so it keeps us understanding and valuing the present moment while also not fretting so much if we miss it, because we understand we get another chance to get that lesson. Here's a fun example I like to give my students too, sis. I tell them, like, nobody in the classroom, of course, but the people who don't attend this class, the people who aren't watching us right now, for example, they have dated the same person over and over again, right? She might be from the UK, she might have been from Uganda last year, she might have been from Alabama, right? But it's the same girl showing up over and over again for you because there's some type of lesson, there's some type of experience that keeps showing up on you. And every time it shows up, it looks different because it's a different moment in time. And it might be more intense because you neglected to take care of what you needed to take care of before. And to me, that's the most empowered perspective of that time orientation. And, what better person to have at such an early part of your boot camp to come and lay that foundation? Because once you get that paradigm shifted, right? Once a person can get that there are different worldviews and this is how important it is, then everything else that comes after that has the proper structure and framing, right, to be understood and interpreted. So, I mean, right on for getting Dr. Nichols in there early.
But also, we've also got, it blends quite nicely into the Unto model. And we've got Dr. Tracy Garrett, who works at Progressive Life. And she's going to be talking about post-traumatic slavery syndrome and the Unto model, which has Dr. Edwin Nichols' model as one of the foundational approaches within the Unto African-centered model. And that's really kind of like introducing people to a framework. I call the model the CBT of African psychology, because it's quite it's got kind of like a recipe to some extent in terms of approaches and what you can do and stages that people that you can work with people to go through to reach wellness from an African-centered perspective. So I think it's one of the models that can be quite helpful to learn how to apply and just to be introduced to. So that's part of I don't know how you feel about me calling it the CBT of African psychology.
Yeah, you must have saw that microfacial expression. I probably had a little something like it. And so to me, that's like calling Howard the Black Harvard.
Yeah, okay, I
You see
hear
what
what
I'm
you're
saying?
saying.
And
Yeah, it's
Howard,
using.
Harvard wishes that Howard was the Black version of it, right?
Yes,
No,
yeah.
Howard is the Black Howard. Into, there is
Them
no
too.
way that, I mean, oh, let me just tell you real quick. I did all of my clinical training at Progressive Life Center.
Uh-huh.
Every semester, every hour was there. Dr. Tracy Garrett was actually one of my supervisors. She
Yeah.
supervised me doing the assessment processes. And I developed a curriculum for training foster parent people who were interested in becoming foster parents. I did their whole certification curriculum, and I did the ongoing in-service modules for them. And so I'm deeply entrenched into that Into model. And so,
but maybe I should have explained myself a bit better. I think what I meant is in terms of when it comes to having a framework for how to do African psychology therapy, it has a framework in a similar way to the way that CBT has a framework for how you apply. I'm trying to get myself out of it. I should just put while I'm ahead.
Don't even worry about it. Don't even worry about it. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm not going to ever go with that, but it's okay because I understand what you're saying. I do.
Yeah, maybe, we can scratch that one.
so Dr. Tracy Garrett is a beautiful sister. She's very knowledgeable. She's been with Progressive Life Center. And actually, I ended up becoming one of the Into trainers for when we onboard. Everybody who comes to work at Progressive Life Center at one time had to be onboarded, and they had to go through the Into learning process and the orientation. And we actually used to take a retreat. And Henry Gregory and I and Dr. Krista Owens, we all used to do that together. But the first time I was introduced to Into was in this text right here. This is by Dr. Daoudi Azibo. This is the first African psychology textbook I've ever owned. And I got this in undergrad at Fisk University, thanks to Dr. Raymond A. Wimbush. He was teaching the course there. And in this book, there's a chapter on Into by Dr. Fred Phillips, who is one of the actual founders of Into psychotherapy. And so he's got a chapter, he's in Afrocentric psychotherapy on page 83 is where he starts. So everybody's in this book. Cam Bones in here, everybody's in this book. Jacob Carruthers, Naeem Akbar, all kind of people. But anyway, this is where I first learned about Into. But then, because you're talking about Into, it's a reader of Afrocentric theory and practice, right? Yeah. Philosophical and humanistic writings of Amanifu Harvey. Dr. Harvey is actually the co-founder of Progressive Life Center with Frederick Phillips.
Oh, yes.
He's the one that's attributed with actually developing the Into model. So, you know, when you hear about him and the way that he and Dr. Phillips have come together, the way that the stories go in modern time is that Dr. Phillips, because he's a social worker, he had the framework of how to develop the organization, the agency, and Dr. Harvey focused more so, not solely, but more so on the development of the Into psychological model. And so when you look at Into psychotherapy, like I said, I've worked, the main population at that time were children in foster care, or so-called at-risk youth. And I actually did my dissertation on the Into model, but I did it in the form of rites of passage. Shout out to Dr. Faye Belgrave, who was one of the facilitators of that rites of passage process, along with Dr. Krista Owens, who's with the Empowerment Center. Yes. They actually helped me with my dissertation and gave me the population to work with to do that. And so when you look at the whole Into framework, sis, it goes so much because, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, again, that's that. I know you're not saying that that's what this is, but it's that tangible, just for everybody else that's listening. Yeah. Cognitive behavioral therapy is that more concrete stuff that's on that Western side of it. Into deals with what's underneath. It deals because Into literally is that life force, it's that energy force.
Yes, of course.
That comes from the Bakongo or the Bantu people, right? And shout out to Dr. Fukiao. I got his book over here somewhere. I'll get to it in a minute, but he talks about the Bakongo worldview and psychospiritual systems. And so when you're looking at Into as a model, and the way that the framework has been established, the very first stage is harmony. The very first principle, what the first thing you do is you establish harmony. In the Western world, we call that rapport, right? But harmony is more than rapport because, setting rapport is, it could be kind of rote, it could be kind of robotic. Oh, hey, it's nice to meet you, do the little small talk chat that's typically obligatory, right? But when you're talking about harmony, you're talking about getting in sync with you and your client. Y'all got to be able to dance together. If I'm Miles Davis and you John Coltrane, I'm Miles Davis and you Ella Fitzgerald, we got to make sure that we're harmonizing with each other and this vibration is going. You see what I'm saying? And so that helped me tremendously because it got me out of that Western training that said that, you as the psychotherapist or the clinician are running the show. What this helped me to understand is like, no, it's something deeper than both of us that's running this show. And so it's to our benefit to get in sync with that. And as the therapist or the clinician, you have a higher awareness maybe of what this is. And so you can help us both to line up with that. And so when you establish that harmony, it was phenomenal. So what I used to do to establish harmony with my little brothers and little sisters, that was a part of it. I didn't call them clients. They were my little brothers and little sisters.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I would do to establish harmony is sometimes we would go play basketball. You know, so this week's session might just be us going down the street to the basketball court and shooting hoops for 45 to 50 minutes because I'm establishing harmony. So the next time we come around, you know, when they got to see Mr. Jeff and we got to talk about some difficult stuff, I've already got that established. They could trust me. You know, they see my game. They've scored. They might have beat me. You know, we've got this thing established now. And all of that is about that Bantu concept of, you know, I see you.
Yeah.
You know, I see you. You know, that's that respect. You look again. We see each other. And so, you know, and that's why you probably saw me, my soul kind of cringe a little bit because
I'm cringing myself because it kind of like it's got nothing to do with CBT, but I kind of like the way I was just thinking about it is to say that it's kind of like there's a framework that you can grasp onto, and that makes it accessible. One of the things I like about N2, it's an accessible model as a clinician to be able to grasp African psychology concepts, which can be quite complicated to grasp at times. They've made a framework for us. It's got stages that you work through, like you said, you know, harmony and such. So it kind of like it can be it makes it easy for you to, well, not necessarily easy, but easier to be able to adopt some of the principles, you know, from that point of view. So
they did an excellent job of bridging, because I think Dr. Harvey and Dr. Phillips, who's now is an ancestor, by the way, they did a wonderful job of bridging the Western and the non-Western philosophies. You know, so like what you're pointing out is it is stages. You know, but at the same time, those stages you could flow back and forth and in between and all around. You know, I might need to reestablish harmony halfway through the day's session, right? And that's okay, right? Because remember that spiral, as opposed to that circle or that straight line. Oh, that's dope, sis. What else you got? I mean, I know it's a lot of people on this list. And
we've got Dr. Shelly Harrell and her soulfulness model, and she talks about rising up rooted, and it's about seeing the origins of meditation or mindfulness as being in Africa. A lot of the African ancestors had ways of getting into a meditative state, into a way of well-being, of, you know, going away and just, you know, thinking and being able to ponder over things, to get in touch with nature, get in touch with a higher being, to be able to rest themselves. So she talks about her soulfulness model, and I feel it was really important to put that as part of the program, because part of African psychology, it isn't something that we just do to our clients, it's something we do to ourselves as well. As an African-centered therapist, you become that way, that approach in your life, you become that way. So you're learning skills that help yourself, but that you can also then pass on to your clients, having had the lived experience of the approach. So, and I feel that the soulfulness model is really good for well-being, because when you're an activist, scholar, warrior, healer, which is what a lot of us are, it can be tiring. It can be tiring to be facing every day different experiences of the system of white supremacy. And if you're not experiencing it yourself, there may be somebody in your family or your community experiencing it, and it may be in the world, and you may be the person who needs to stand up for it. So it's like, how do we have some time to have a rest from it, that the struggle doesn't actually wear us out? So the soulfulness model, I felt it was really important to have that as part of the schedule.
Just you know, of course, I got to say something. So that mindfulness piece, it used to bother me tremendously because of what you're saying. It's like they extracted, Western perspective, European model, extracted from an entire worldview, an entire lifestyle, this thing called mindfulness, and tried to apply it devoid of the actual culture that it extends from. And so, and then it becomes, like you're saying, it becomes something that you do as opposed to something that you are in a lifestyle that you live. They took and it's kind of like the same way that when they making medicines, right? They would go and get a whole plant, right? And then they will extract the active ingredients and create a drug, right? And then that drug has all kind of deleterious and negative side effects to it. Whereas if you would just keep the plant whole, you would cut back and probably even diminish the majority of those negative side effects that you're experiencing. And so two people that you reminded me of when you were saying that, one is Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum, the African unconsciousness, roots of ancient mysticism and modern psychology. phenomenal. This brother here is, and then of course my main man Wayne Chandler with Ancient Futures, right? And they both talk about how these philosophies of meditation, these philosophies of wellness extend, and of course you see Rahotep was my guest last week with kinetic yoga skills. They all talking about how no, this is our stuff. This is nothing foreign to us. This is nothing that we have to reinvent, or the only thing we have to do is become aware that it's us and that it's within us and it's already our natural disposition. And therefore it's easier for you to apply it first to yourself and then to others. Yeah, you got to put your mask on first. Yep. Yeah. What else you guys is list a few more for us, run down the list for us.
We've got Dr. Shari Daktari Hicks, who's going to be doing a session on breath, dance and music. So again, It's about how do we put it into practice. There's going to be a wellness, an Africans only wellness group that will run, there'll be 5 sessions throughout, so that you'll have a safe space to be able to discuss things. We've also got Dr. Cheryl Grills, who's going to be talking about the ACAN personality model, because we often get socialized to Eurocentric personality models, but it's about how do we then also realize some of the African-centered personality models that may help us understand ourselves and understand other people. You'll be doing a session where you'll be talking about the elements, and you're going to be talking about the Netaru and about remind me the other model that you're going to be bringing in as well.
Yeah, so we're dealing with the psychospirituality. I was, talking about the Orisha, talking about the
Netaru. That is the Orisha. Yes.
And when we look at the Orisha, and I had these books out as part of our African psychology literature. These are talking about various Orisha, right? And these are just a few of the books. But when we talk about the Orisha, to me, the Orisha and the Netaru are actually African personality types. To me, those are our personality theories. Those are our personality types. And when we get those personality types, and we understand that, then we start seeing the stories and how the different Orisha and Netaru have interacted with each other and the product of their interaction. Then we say, so you've got these personality dispositions. We start to look at African rituals differently now. If you're down and you're dealing with Vodun, you might see somebody get mounted, by Lua. If you're dealing in the Kemetic science of Osiris Set, you see somebody is carrying a particular deity. But what happens when a person is mounted or possessed or carrying, what they do is they take on a whole different personality, right? And to me, those are our personality types. And if we can embrace it that way and get out of the scariness, your polytheistic ancestors and pagan ways, dead that. That's a way to weaken us and make us turn our back on our high spiritual sciences that would be actually functional and beneficial to us in this day and time. And so that's what I'll be dealing with, is that as a personality theorist, and I really, really look forward to that one. I can't wait to be able to jump that off. So since we're getting close to time, I got Dr. Moore coming in just a second. So downshift a little bit and just run down the list and tell people how to actually access the listing and how they register for it and things of that nature.
So we've got Dr. Brandon Gamble, who's going to be doing about African psychology and people and young people. Dr. Herberta Jackson Lohman, who'll be doing a session on race, class, gender. And we've also got
she's the current president of ABSI, right?
I think the one before the current one.
She's outgoing. Okay, because I know Dr. Grills is also previous president.
Yes. We've got Dr. Matt E. Lewis, who'll be doing about Kemetic wellness. Dr. Ifitayo Ojelade, who'll be doing about ancestral connecting for protecting. Dr. Daryl Rowe, who'll be doing about proverbs and to preserve Africans.
Also past president of ABSI.
Yes. And let me see the last bit that we've got here. So we've also got a study skills one. We've got one on depression by Dr. Benson Cook. He's a long-standing member of ABSI, past president. I believe Dr. Cook is. He's at the UDC. Sis, tell us how to access this. Tell people how to see that schedule and how they can register for it and get in on this. They don't want to miss it. Y'all don't want to miss it. Well, if people have got their pens ready, so to book, go to bit.ly.
I'm gonna put it in the chat. bit.ly.
Yeah. /2 capital S.
Capital S like Sam.
Yeah. 1. Yeah. W for whiskey. Capital L. Capital R. capital W.
Okay, this is strange. All right, .com.
So that's just the shortened code that you can get straight to be able to book it. Do you want me to say that
.com?
again?
No. Is
No,
it
no,
.com?
no. It's that, no, it's just that. I'll tell you another one in a moment. That is just the straight to be able to get to. It's like a shortened link to be able to get to it. Yeah, that's brilliant. And then another one, if you want to get to it, is www.N for Norman, W for whiskey, A for alpha, H for hotel, .learnworlds. That's LEARNWARLDS.com.
Okay, so that's www.nwah.learnworlds.com.
Yeah, gotcha. That's brilliant. Yes, yeah.
I got them both in the chat for everybody, and anybody going back and rewatching this video, or those watching it live on Facebook. Just come back to the video, and you will be able to get those registration codes. Sister McInnis.
That course starts on the 6th of August. It starts on the 6th of August, 2021, but people can sign up from now. Okay, and so on the website, there's also other courses that people can do before then, just to bring themselves up to speed. So
how long does it last? So it's going from August to where?
It's August 2021 until February 2023.
Nice.
So you're going to be watered and fed with African psychology all year round. And we wanted to create an online community of people like-minded. Find your tribe. Are
people able to a la carte this? They don't have to do the whole series. Can they pick?
Well, I'm wanting people to be able to do the whole series together. The reason being is that when people just pick the ones that they already know, they then don't get exposed to new things that may interest them.
Okay, so no, they cannot. They have to register for the whole thing.
Register for the whole thing. And I feel like I'm doing a session on African-centered approaches to supervision, because for clinicians and therapists and coaches, we often find that our supervisors don't work from an African-centered perspective. So how can we bring that into the supervision space, and we can learn to be African-centered in our approach to supervision? So I'll be doing that session.
And I was fortunate to have done all my training at Progressive Life Center. So not only, and I got pushback actually from my HBCU about doing everything there, because they said they weren't APA approved. And so part of my internship working with Dr. Garrett actually was to get Progressive Life Center APA approved. So, we developed the whole packet of documentation. I don't know where it went after I left, but that was part of my internship there. But all of my supervisors were into oriented. And the way that I was able to push back against my graduate program, because there was a white guy in my program, and they try to say, if your internship is not APA approved, you might be able to get licensed. I said, well, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. And I said, well, what about him? He said, well, he might be going back to Canada. I said, well, heck, I might be going back to Africa. And they had to bow out. They had to get out the way. But so
this course that I've developed, it is approved by the British Psychological Society for continuing professional development. And it's the first course that has been ever approved by the British Psychological Society for continuing professional development. And I really wanted us to get that approval, because people need to know that a course, the standard of the teaching is up to a certain standard, the ethics of the course up to a standard.
And we got to be careful too, because because we're celebrating getting that approval, for African psychological work. Well, and so I know. So, but it's not about their approval though, because it is what it is anyway, right? Yeah.
The thing is that it would be good if ABSI could approve it, because that was where I went to at first. But sometimes we've got to be African-centered in a Western world at times. So it's kind of like it's useful, but it's a good course whether the British Psychological Society recognise it or not. It's still an excellent course, and the people,
it's rock solid. Give people your contact information, sis, and I got to transition to Dr. Moore.
Yeah. Okay. So if people want to contact me, it's about my website. It's Nubia Wellness and Healing.co.uk. So Nubia Wellness and Healing.co.uk.
Nubia Wellness and Healing.co.uk.
Yeah. Yeah. So www.Nubia Wellness and spelled AND healing.co.uk.
Okay, I just typed that into the chat, sis. Yeah. Dr. McInnis, I really appreciate you for spending this time with us. I know you got a lot going on, and peace and prayers and blessings to your family, and hopefully all, rock solid for you on your end of the pond. And I look forward to breaking bread with you soon.
So it's been great being here. I'd love to be here for the whole of the the event. But if it's okay if I then go, now I've done my part, or do you need to come back to me?
No, it's all good. We're shifting to Dr. Moore. You're welcome to
Thank you.
stay, and observe in the background if you can. But yeah, we're gonna shift to. I don't know if you ever met Dr. T. Owens Moore. This is Dr. Timothy Moore, and Dr. Moore. This is Dr. Erica McInnis.
Hello, hi.
Dr. Moore is he's one of my brothers from another mother. He's down there in the ATL Chair of Psychology at the Clark Atlanta University. He's a scholar extraordinaire. Matter of fact, one of his many books, The Science of Melanin. He's a melanin scholar. He's also a fellow Bison from HU, so we got some of the same teachers from Howard University. But this is Dr. Moore. And so, he and I, we're going to take it for the rest of the program here. But I really appreciate you, Dr. McInnis.
Thank you very much. And I may, as I'm driving somewhere, listen in that I can hear the rest of it. So thank you.
Right on, sis. Hey, take care and all the best.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Dr. Moore, what's up, man?
Peace, my brother. Thank you for the invitation.
Man, I appreciate you being here, brother. I know you got it going on. You got a lot. And by the way, I wanted to tell you, Dr. Moore is actually 932 years old. He has found the Fountain of Youth, and he will not tell the rest of us where it is. This brother is a tennis champion. He's constantly playing tennis. He's out there getting that sunlight, getting the vitamin D, getting that melanin stimulated. The brother walks it like he talks it. He is a scholar extraordinaire. And, it's very interesting, good brother, because I was intending to invite you for this session. And then you sent me the link for a video that you made where you were literally pulling books off your shelf and talking about various scholars of African and Black psychology. And you did that. And I was like, man, this brother, he's got his melanin activated. He's psychic on those levels, because that's exactly what I was going to invite you to do. Man, you see what I'm saying? Hold on, man. See, this is what I want us to do, man. I want us to go back and forth with this. Hold on.
I know.
I've been trying to throw out books. Is that Bynum right there that you just pulled up?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Hold on. You see what I'm saying, man? This is what this is about.
Right.
I remember I was an undergrad at Fisk, and I came across Dr. Bynum's book, that one, The African Unconscious. And, he was a director of behavior medicine at UMass. And that's phenomenal. The brother's phenomenal. He's a very deep thinker. And so I started meditating on some of his concepts. And I sent this brother a super long email about, what I came out with on my meditation. And part of what I was dealing with was how we might be studying melanin, not incorrectly, but there was another perspective that we could take on melanin. And of course, I had no idea the vast research that had already been done on it. But I was just thinking, what came to me is that we were looking at melanin as if you're like a person who didn't understand microscopes were necessary to look at microscopic organisms. And so I started looking at melanin in the gaseous state, and I looked at like, why is it dark in space? And to me, it was like, because, there's gaseous melanin in between. We think of space as being empty, vacuum, or void. And, I don't have any rhyme or reason behind any of this. This just came out in my meditation, brother. And, I have the audacity to be saying it in front of you as a melanin scholar, right? It's like, because I know you could go in there and you could break it all the way down. But those were some of the things that I was inspired to begin to look into because of Dr. Bynum's work. And I understand that you have a work with Dr. Bynum, Why Darkness Matters.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
No, you got it, brother.
The powerful thing is you just had your guest on, Dr. McInnis, and the names that you were rolling off, because we've all crossed paths. And so when you talk about the whole issue of melanin, and we talk about it on a scientific level, it binds, brings things together, absorbs, actually is like self-replicating. So as you're talking the names, and she's over there in England, I may be there later in the year. Brother named Robin Walker. I don't know if you have his book or
I couldn't find it. I couldn't get my hand on it, but yes.
Yeah. So I say that because we're dealing with, you mentioned Brother Wayne Chandler. I know Wayne Chandler wrote credits in the back of his book, wrote credits in the back of your book. You guys support my work. Brother Bynum and I, we have a book together called Why Darkness Matters, The Power of Melanin in the Brain. So students that may be listening and hearing, guess what? There's a cosmic consciousness out there, but unless we say it, unless we push it, people aren't going to know. So I respect you for having this platform right here to expose people to different sources, different information, because other than that, it's not going to exist.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying that as the chair of psychology at an HBCU. And so when we talk about the importance of African Black psychology scholarship, one thing that I recognize is that it goes beyond the quote unquote field of psychology, but also incorporates all kinds of stuff. Like, for example, I would consider this book by Dr. Charles Finch, The African Background of Medical Science, as a book of African psychology, right? Because it's dealing with African spirituality, African culture. I consider Dark Ghetto by Kenneth Clark, to be a textbook of Black psychology, because he's a Black psychologist. of course, our teacher, Dr. Jules Harrell, the Dominican psychology, so we've got all, and just one more just for right now, Ritual by Malidoma Somé. To me, this is a textbook of African psychology. And so, Doc, why is it so important for us to be able to put these things forward? Why is it important, especially those of us in the classroom and those of us that are practicing? Why is it necessary for us to not only be familiar with this, but to also keep it at the forefront of our consciousness?
Yeah, and the reason why I'm wearing a shirt, got Steve Biko on here. He's the legend, from South Africa. But one of the most powerful comments he said was, the most powerful tool in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So by us not knowing these names, not knowing the people and the work, you just mentioned Kenneth Clark, and I'm reading Black Power again by Kwame Ture and Charles Hamilton, and he mentions dark ghetto several times within this. So he just talked about the cross-fertilization of knowledge and information that authors have. And that's where the students today get challenged because they never heard of a name. I mean, I get tired of going to class now. Have you heard of? Because they haven't heard of. Because what? They're not reading the books. So when we start cross-pollinating and start looking at our connections worldly, except the sister you just interviewed was over there in England. And she's talking about the brothers and sisters that we know here at AB Side that we are friends with. Vincent Cook, Darryl Rose. I mean, we know all them, but do the students know? That's why it's up to us as the Jegnas to pass it on, to give them what they need to know the story. Because if we don't do it, again, it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. And this work is more than intellectual, right? And that's the other thing about the African worldview. It's not just an intellectual thing, right, Doc?
Oh my goodness, man! Like I said, I'm wearing a Steve Biko shirt. I had a Fulbright scholarship, and I worked in Brazil, Salvador Bahia, and I had a chance to work at the Steve Biko Institute. Wow. So I got a chance to lecture over several years, going back, and the students want the information. Of course, we know the difference in language is the problem because they speak Portuguese, we speak American, we speak English. So you go to Senegal, they speak in French. Go to other parts of Africa, different languages. So that's where the problem is with our communication. But while I was there, students are crying over what I'm sharing with them because they've never heard. Like they've never heard the Middle Passage from their experience. We're talking about psychology and literature. You're talking about research. Frantz Fanon was a psychiatrist from Martinique with the French background. So for him, he tried to provide whatever he could from his perspective about making changes. So while I'm there in Brazil, they got a crazy whacked out image of black skin, white man. So that's what you're looking for.
That one is wretched.
For yours. So that's the front cover of the one I have. That's the front cover of the one you have. In Brazil, it was some whacked out like Sambo image.
Whoa. Like
belittling the whole topic. So in Brazil, there hasn't been a lot of African consciousness in the past, now moving towards that liberation. So for me to be able to go back there and teach in that environment about worldly connections, because again, they're isolated there and on the continent of South America, Brazil's the only one teaches speaks Portuguese.
Really? And isn't that the largest African population outside of the continent of Africa?
Speaking Portuguese.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that language piece becomes critical. So what we need to do, as you're sharing right now, is make those connections abroad and try to globalize it. So maybe this pandemic has been helpful because now we got people that are able to do these types of venues and expose people to new literature. Right.
And we were speaking about Frantz Fanon. This is the Fanon Center Journal. And so it's Perspectives on the Mental Health of Black Persons. This is from the Fanon Research and Development Center in Inglewood, California. This was from back in the 70s. Yeah. And I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Carol, also formerly known as Carol Phillips, but she's Carol Brunson Day at this point, for putting me on with these original texts, man. She bequeathed these to me and just handed them over to me. But you're saying that international piece, and I talked to Brother Yasir last week. He's tugging on me. He's like, man, you got to come on to Kemet, man. I told him that you throwing them gentle nudges at me too, like, hey, they're going again. But he's doing that global thing like you are, revolutionizing, connecting with people on a movement level, on an energetic healing level. And that's what I was saying, because this whole psychology thing is not just this intellectual, cognitive, emotional peace, but it's also the study of the soul. And that's what our worldview provides.
You know, it's powerful too, as we make these connections. So for me, the Jegna that I look at on an international level is Frantz Fanon. So because of his work, and he died at 36. I mean, he made some monumental impact without even living a long life. His birthday was yesterday, 25th.
Oh man, lady, happy birthday.
My galactic signature on the Mayan calendar was yesterday. So I'm just looking at the whole spiritual significance of all these things that line up so we can move forward and make a name. So for Fanon, you know, as a psychiatrist, we know about our psychiatrist on this side, Dr. Francis Wells, psychiatrist, trying to break down that mind and that mental state as to why it is that we keep making the same mistakes. Psychologist on the mental state, you got Amos Wilson. That's what I got. I'm working with you, my brother. I don't know if it's cosmic, I'm telling you.
Blow for blow, huh?
Amos Wilson, all his work in terms of breaking it down. You can see him on YouTube. He's no longer here and existing with us. Blueprint for Black Power. You know, I got it right back there. You see it right back on the top of my head. There's right there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that importance of not putting it on the bookshelf, taking it off the bookshelf and reading it and applying it. That's why I went back to look at the Black Power book again, because I just finished a book by Malik Zulu Sabaz.
Yeah.
The Book of College.
Okay. Really? Okay.
Definitely a recommended text. So as he's looking and talking about some of the topics, now kind of understand Ali Muhammad, you understand Louis Farrakhan, you understand the dynamics, because Brother Khalid Muhammad passed at 53. You call him a master psychologist. I call Malcolm X a master psychologist. Yep. You know, so even beyond this book knowledge, this information that we have on the shelves, now you got to apply it. And those were brothers, and we got sisters that have done it. Apply the knowledge, and that's what we have to take it out of the classroom and make it real for students today.
Right. I'll tell you, Rubu back there on yourself. Speaking of the sisters that have done it too, you know, Mama Marimba. And I know so many people that have that book, and very few people that have actually read it cover to cover. It's so deep, because she's talking about deconstructing this Western worldview and understanding where it comes from, which is a fragmented place, which is a place that Amos Wilson spoke about. You know, you cannot successfully base your concept of mental health, you know, on the definitions of people who are mentally ill.
Yeah, we got to take authority, and that's why I think you're presenting this series. You had Dr. Hope Hill on here with Brother Dr. Harrell, and both of them were our professors. If it wasn't for Dr. Hope Hill, I wouldn't have had this book that we use for class.
Okay.
So this one, to me, just broke it on down as the Why We Crazy. Even though it's Frantz Fanon coming from a French perspective describing it, no, it's just talking about colonialism, because we colonized here in the United States.
Right.
You know, colonized here in terms of someone taking our history and our culture and our environment away from us. So the colonial experience really presents some real challenges with people's perceptions on what is really freedom.
Mm-hmm.
We think we're free right now, but in reality is we're still being controlled, manipulated. So we have to start looking at ways that we can alter that. And again, I think that's probably why they kept us away from psychology as a discipline for so long. Just to get education. You know, I mean, Dr. Woodson, you know, he didn't really, I guess, enjoy that HBCU experience, so he saw the problem, so he wrote his book, Misorientation Negro, and you followed it up. I think you followed it up with something else to talk about the dumbing down, which is what? Reflections on the Miseducation of the Negro.
Yes, sir.
So we were pushing to these disciplines in these areas that may not have had any much influence. I mean, we appreciated, without a question, our teachers and educators. The point is, where was the power and influence? Take us away from engineering, science, and mathematics. Let's go do the education. In psychology, you know, we had to wait until 1968 to kind of establish something to say, look, we got to establish our own ways of looking at the world. So again, these vehicles that you have right now, I always admired you on your own end to try to, you know, create your own vision, rather than, like you said, letting the, you know, I guess, oppressive mentality that is some of your professors telling you how you should be. I mean, I had the same challenges in grad school like you may have, but the fortunate thing for us is that we went to an HBCU, and it's more nurturing versus the battles that many of our colleagues go to PWIs.
Right. That's what I always tell folks, you know, go to HBCU. My suggestion is always go to HBCU for undergrad. And I'd say grad school too, but you know, we can be a little bit more flexible there because you get that foundation. But the thing is, I mean, I remember talking to you, brother, before I published Dumb and Down. And I remember just, seeking wisdom because I know that you were a publisher, you were a scholar. And I was like, I talked to you, I talked to Dr. Wells, and I talked to Wimbush, and I talked to everybody there. I talked to Wayne, I talked to people who I knew had put books out there. And he introduced me to Mr. Coates, Black Classic Press. And so when I was just trying to get that understanding and what I came up with, and remember you told me, he said, okay, just make sure that you can always keep them in stock, right? You told me, he said, be careful, just keep that in mind always, because it's nothing worse than somebody trying to get one of your books and you don't have any, right? And that's what I find so often, like when we're looking for Dr. Cambone's books now, it's tight. It's tough to get your hands on these. And it's because what we have to do a lot of times to get our literature out there is that we have to take it on for ourselves, right? We have to, in order to control our own literature, we have to put it out for ourselves. Uh-oh, hold on. Bam.
Right. So he's
same book,
passed.
different cover.
Yeah, he
Right.
passed. So he's got his own publishing company. It was Nubian, I think, Publications.
Yep.
Nubian Nation Publications. So reality is, if someone passes, I mean, one of the most impressive books I had and have is Psychic Trauma.
Yes.
So I use this one for class because it dealt with economics, politics, history. Because we ain't got the history straight, you can't do nothing else beyond that. But the brother passed. So the book became not printed anymore. So brother Cambone has passed. I don't know how it's operating with his publishing company, but that becomes this story. My first book was The Signs of Melanin. This is the 1995 edition. Doesn't exist anymore because the publisher went out of business.
Right.
So now it becomes the game, as you just said, about the whole issue of publishing. So that book, I don't know, that could be online for $1,000 or something crazy on Amazon because they say they can't find it.
Right.
So it becomes a game in that world. That's why I'm saying control your literature. And that's why I respect you for being able to have multiple sources now, not just the one book you have.
Yeah. It's so important. I try to help my students to understand that we have literature that we can also reference and cite, that we have standards of scholarship, and that, a lot of times, of course, in the publisher parish world of academia, we're pushed to get our articles into these journals, these, tier one, there's these rankings if we're trying to get points for eventual tenure. And one of our ancestors that was really good at balancing that is none other than Dr. Asa Hilliard. If you went on to one of those like JSTOR, one of those listservs, the scholarship portals, you put his name in there, you're going to come back with, 30, 40, 50 articles that he was publishing everywhere. While simultaneously, he kept his feet 10 toes in the ground. Man of Sabah, man, I use that book so much in my thesis, man. So the reawakening of the African mind. When you deal with, somebody like a Dr. Hilliard, he has such a prolific balance. He worked in education. Matter of fact, the sister, Dr. Carol Phillips, formerly Carol Phillips, but current Carol Brunson Day, she worked closely with Dr. Asa Hilliard. You see, he did the publishing, but he also wrote books on African-centered scholarship. But that's another brother whose work, he didn't sell. He had his own publishing company, Waking Up a Maroon Within. Yes, sir. He had his own publishing company, and his sister, his daughter Nefertari was the one running that, and she just became an ancestor. I was literally working with her, I had this idea to get all of these Asa Hilliard researchers and articles into a reader. And, so she had communicated with her mom, for us to take this task on. But of course, when she transitioned suddenly like that, it put his scholarship in jeopardy. I had this white dude from the University he wasn't from the University of Tennessee Press contacted me to do a review on a book that they are considering publishing on J.A. Rogers. And this dude is trying to, cut his teeth by taking chapters out of existing J.A. Rogers books and putting it together and calling it a reader. And of course, that was my feedback. I was like, man, you better not put this out there. Because first of all, the books are still available. He's not doing justice to J.A. Rogers. I ran it down and the publisher wrote me back and said, I'm very surprised at your review on this. And I'm like, no, because I understand the ancestral work. And this is just a vulture. I think it's just a vulture coming in trying to eat off of our ancestral legacy, man.
Yeah, unless they're saying that those books aren't available anymore. Nature Leads, Sex, Race, the volumes. I got all 3 volumes. Man and Superman. I don't know if he's just saying they're not available anymore. So you want to read them. I mean, 'cause that could happen, but that's what I'm saying. Exploitation happens, right? I got the paperback of those.
You know, I bought these three in the streets of Gambia.
What, man?
The street vendor in Gambia.
He was a world man. That's why I'm saying the impact of those that work hard. You ever heard of Hubert Harrison?
I have not.
Hubert Harrison was called the Black Socrates. They say he introduced Marcus Garvey to the crew in the world and exposed him. But there's two thick volumes on his work by a white guy named Jeffrey Phillips. And thorough text. I got that upstairs in the library. I don't want to run up there and get it, but I'm showing you in that the family approved of it, I guess, that he could do that. But you're right, the exploitation, because Hubert Harrison also wrote, I don't have the one that the white guy wrote about him, but he also wrote When Africa Awakes.
Nice.
Hubert Harrison. So if you get a chance to look at his work, he was, like I said, called him walking encyclopedia.
Right. And so with this, I think that if the guy was actually putting together complete works of J.A. Rogers, I would be a little bit more lenient, but he was just taking little slices out of stuff. And I think that the publishers asked me to do it because of my second book, which is Rambling Ruminations, where I went into the Pittsburgh Courier, New York, Amsterdam News, and all of those different obscure newspapers, and I put a compilation of stuff together. And, you know, I actually had access to his personal archives, which are housed at Fisk University Special Collection. So my book is different from what he did. And I'm upholding the ancestral legacy of J.A. Rogers. I think this dude is just a culture vulture, you know?
Yeah, especially if they said that J.A. Rogers' work is still there, just tell people go read his work.
Just come, they go get it, you know, go get your J.A. Rogers book. Let's talk about this, brother.
Okay, Black psychologist, right? Yeah. Mine looks a little more beat up than yours, but
you know, because you probably got an original copy.
Yeah.
So this brother, Reginald Jones,
yeah,
to me, he was the master organizer. I mean, if you look at these people that are included, and this is just the third edition.
That's right.
Here's the fourth edition.
Yeah.
He was the master organizer. He was able to pull people together to contribute to the psychological literature like nobody else. I met him one time. I was in Virginia, and I had my wife, she bought me all of his books at one point in time. You know, even these textbooks, Handbook of Tests and Measurements for Black Populations, 2 volumes. He's a master organizer. He was able to pull people together, pull literature together across conceptual lines. I've got volume 2 of Black Psychology as well. It's over here somewhere. I can't find volume 1 yet, but I'm working on it. But he's one of our master organizers. How important is it in today's world to be able to organize and pull people together across disciplines, across ideologies to produce more scholarship for us?
I think that's our weakness, that we don't organize, we don't work together. So I think that was planned and purposeful, because the more disconnected people are, there's no uniting. Therefore, you can't fight the system. We always talk about that. You know, you got a finger, you poke somebody, you got 2, you put that together. Oh my goodness! And so by us being disconnected and not having a opportunity to work together, that's why I'm saying I'm reading that. This is the book I was telling you about. Book of Khaled.
Yeah.
So thick text, 500 pages, man. I couldn't put it down. Read the whole week. So
that's no joke.
What Malcolm experienced with Elijah, and now we have the same thing with Khaled and Farrakhan. It's like, what don't we learn? So the whole thing about organization. So the nation was an organization. So they got something that's at least positive. Church, so organization. They got something that's at least positive, but all of them got issues.
Right.
But at least in my opinion, we need to work with those organizations that at least have some level of respect. And I think that when history is told, it looks that we let external forces come in and alter the momentum. And that's why I'm saying I'm using the college. If you get a chance to check that out, brother. I appreciate Brother Malik Shabazz for putting that out, because that was on our Howard days when we were there.
Right. So that's right, because you know the brother.
Yeah. Well, not personally, but he was there on the time period.
That was a second.
And then, like I said, and Brother Khaled, you know, he was educated. That's why he was strong in the nation. He wasn't just parroting and just saying what everybody else said. What Elijah said, Farrakhan said. Nah, he said. And that's why it kind of blew up at the latter years. And then he started working with the New Black Panther Party. Not like he started that, but putting words to action. And that's what scares the enemy.
Right, because you're not just pontificating and head in the clouds, but you actually like you're saying, taking it and practically applying the wisdom that existed in many cases for millennia, right? You got the book of Tahotep, that goes way back, the ancient teachers and wisdom teachers of Tahotep that we can apply right now today. It's important, man, and being able to talk to brothers like you, people like you that make time, for these types of conversations is also important because, thank you, by the way, for inviting Stacy Patton and I, my colleague who was on with us that first week. There it is. That's what I'm saying, man. Inviting myself and Stacy Patton into your classroom, to actually talk to your students. And, people like us in the classroom, I think are vital, for the transformation of how our students even conceptualize education. That's a real quick shout out to the Association of Black Psychology and the Journal of Black Psychology, more scholarship that we produce.
Right.
So what you've been in the classroom a while. What is your overall experience of the classroom and where psychology needs to be headed in the near future?
Well, it's definitely changed with the remote world, the remote teaching online. And so it's not really just psychology, all areas are impacted. Given that we're talking about psychology in the mind, things are not good this day and age because you and I are throwing out books. You and I are kicking the knowledge from the written material. Kids can just go ahead and push a button, and they think they got the answer. Right. Push a button, and they think that's all it is. And so that limits the mind. I mean, I was just impressed that the sister McInnis was telling you the website, and you now you're working it out. You got it printed up. I was writing it out and got it wrong. So the mind has changed where people are no longer, again, in my opinion, resourceful enough to apply multiple things. We're now so one-track minded, and we now can't see the bigger picture. So the classroom has changed that way because, like I said, rather than asking students, "Hey, have you heard of Asa Hilliard?" Because this is a book that Asa Hilliard, Obadeli, and Nia, who owns a bookstore, Madu Bookstore in Atlanta, Georgia. That's right. Black books go to a black bookstore. So they, the students don't know how to put that together. Because we can tell them something, but they don't know that somebody came before Frances Cress Welsing that was or influenced her, Nellie Fuller. And you don't know any of this until you start reading. Nellie Fuller. So you don't know it until you start reading. That's why, for me, one of the examples of in the book of Eli, not the book, actually the Bible, but the movie that Denzel Washington starred in. He saw how dysfunctional the people were because they lacked knowledge. They had no books, so they didn't know how to live. That's like the Dark Ages when they didn't have any knowledge about out in Europe, and people were just living dirty, and the bubonic plague, is escalating because people don't know they're supposed to wash and
hygiene. Yeah,
they don't know about the cosmos. So the Dark Ages, man, can lock people's minds away. So with the internet today, students have access to see Asa Hilliard, even though he's passed. Access to see Amos Wilson, even though he's passed. Dr. Wilson, even though they've passed. So they can see the ancestors, but the internet becomes easy. Just push a button and listen to somebody. No, it takes work, though, to apply the information. And so that's why I'm saying right now, I think we're in a challenging situation where students may not be pushing themselves. They're just like looking for that grade, where then it becomes problematic with the whole institutional learning. So it's changed.
And it's unfortunate, brother, because of that neurological shift, because that's what I'm hearing you said, the processing is different because the processing is different. And so when you have a professor that's still holding them to those standards of turning pages in the book, then that professor becomes the rigid one, the one that's too hard, the one that's not, accommodating, the one who's problematic. And now I've run into that, admittedly, I've run into that because I'm gonna be that one. I'm gonna be that dude that's still going to, not give in to the excuses that come, while at the same time trying to be understanding that, like you said, people are using these pocket computers now. And people think, and a lot of students are actually working from cell phones. Like they would do their assignments on cell phones. They would now just dictate their texts as opposed to even thumb typing them. And so I don't think enough people understand the neural physiology or the neural anatomy that comes with learning And so you're a neuroscientist, right? You are a neuroscientist. So can you mind speaking to us a little bit about how new technology can shift how we even are capable of engaging reality?
Yeah, I got another book upstairs dealing with the mind change. A woman from England, a white woman who's won some awards in teaching, and she explains how the social world that we're living in has really altered our mindset. I don't know if you know a guy named Joseph Ledoux, who wrote a book called The Synaptic Self. So you know the synapses, neuron coming together. In between that is where all the activity happens, where the chemicals and the changes happen and occur. Well, the synaptic self, I mean, basically, we're all receiving the same information when we hear something, but you have something different in your mind because you have a history to it. Mm-hmm. So that's why you're forming it differently in your brain. So the way that we're being bombarded now with these traumatic events, seeing somebody get killed on TV, another one get killed on TV, you see the trauma over and over and over, and you get stuck and fixated like that. Guess what? Your mind is fixated on that. So we have to look at changing our mind by focusing on something different. And the reason why we've been told that we were so inferior for so long was it benefited somebody. It couldn't possibly be inferior if they have all these rules and regulations against you. If you're inferior, you couldn't elevate in the first place. Well, they know you're not inferior. And it comes down to, again, having jobs and having access. So whatever I can do to eliminate you being my competition, I will keep you in that dumbed down state. So that's why, again, that classroom experience becomes important. So this whole online that we've noticed the past 2 years, students don't like it. Professors don't like it. Students like, especially at HBCU, they can't vibe with this disconnect because that's not us. Our African heritage, our axiological reference for us as African people is what? Interpersonal contact. And so to now dismiss that, it makes it hard to, in my opinion, to engage. So I think a lot of European or melanin recessive people like this because they like this. They don't have to have that contact.
They like this because they like this. I like that.
I mean, because you think about it, I was administrator of another institution that had an online degree completion program. My melanin recessive scholars enjoyed it. They liked it. I didn't really prefer it. This is all before pre-COVID. This is a while ago, but don't like the interaction with students. Well, that's why we're here. But some people don't see that as valuable, but that's why we're here. So the whole dialectic situation, I think this is now benefiting these like Republican conservative folks because they want to get rid of liberal education. They're like, all that religion stuff, spirituality, all that doesn't mean nothing. We don't need to have that. We're wasting money funding these schools dealing with that. You just saw at Howard University, you had a whole blow up with Cornell West talking about why you guys getting rid of some kind of literature, some kind of stuff. Classics. Yeah, but not really understanding it's an economic decision for the institution to make. So we gotta rule that, in my opinion, out of proportion. But it's still that reality of the knowledge comes from working with it. And that's why you're now getting term papers with one long paragraph because they can't break down the ideas because they can't conceptualize things. So it has gotten much worse.
And we oftentimes look at the effects of it and not necessarily acknowledge the intentionality of it, meaning that I think, and I stand by this, that technology as it's being released incrementally, of course, because this stuff exists, and its release is designed to actually shift the mind and function of populations, like the intentional dumbing down, if you will. That's been my perspective. Yeah, you didn't make it to Kemet yet. I guess you'll be gone. But when you go and see written on stone, the papyrus, taking the time and creating things off of some stuff that they had to create from some reeds in the water, and just the whole mindset. Because you see brothers and sisters today, what can they create? What can they do? You know what I mean? So that's why Carter G. Woodson wrote, he's a Negro talking about, we've been taught how to live and not how to make a live. So we don't know how to create and do and build, and that becomes problematic. And the educational system that we're in is what's leading to that. And that's why history being the foundation. Again, if you don't know who you are, if you don't understand that you have a background that you stand on, or rather than you just a Black Anglo-Saxon, Nathan Garrett talking about, our scholars put the work out there. All of them, Amos Wilson went and, I don't know if you read his most recent one on self-defeat. Yes, sir.
Self-hatred and self-defeat.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're talking about the scholars who have done the work. And so when I started looking at how do we create our own Black think tanks, how do we create our own institutions, Chancellor Williams wrote a book called The Rebirth of African Civilization.
That's right.
The work's already been done.
Yep.
Shaking the D up. I actually gave a keynote, I guess a commencement address last week for independent school here in Atlanta, and connected to Remember Ani and her work. Sister Burgestine Sanyang invited me and got a chance to speak to students. They have a sharp sister, 14-year-old graduated going to Spelman. I mean, we can do some things when we control the dynamics of the educational experience. But when we're waiting on someone else to do it, it's problematic. So all I'm saying is that it's up to us to teach the students right, and it starts off with this. And I'm saying it because I got the Shake Out the Day Out award for the presentation. And Shaking the Day Out, he fought tirelessly. He had 2 PhDs just to prove to white folks that look, those Egyptians were Africans and dark. So he's our I stand on the shoulders of great people.
Mm-hmm. There's a brother who was a student of Dr. Diop. He had a book called An African Answer, and it's a very interesting concept and perspective that the elder shares, which is that the difference between symptomatic and symbolic thinking. I mean, he says that it's the symbolic thinking that causes us so much peril and hardship, but it's the actual symptomatic thinking that's directly related to reality, and then he's saying that that's the way that we're supposed to go.
So not
Theophilo Benga, yes, sir.
So that's the one you were talking about.
No. I'm not talking about Dr. Obenga. I don't know why I'm Edgar Ridley is the elder's name.
Yeah, he wrote a book called, I think, The Neurological Misadventures of Man.
A Primordial Man. Yep.
Yeah, I didn't know he was a Diop student, but okay.
Yeah. He worked. He says he worked directly with Diop in West Africa. He and I, we speak almost at least once a week, at length, because of course I don't abandon symbolic thinking. He totally abandons it. I'm saying, no, it's a place for it if you use it as a tool, but I do see how it can be used to limit your ability to function in reality. And that's his whole thing. He's saying that that's the main problem that we're facing. But yeah, that's him. And he's a brilliant elder. We shoot the thing, for just hours, man.
I mean, listen to the title of that book, The Neurological Misadventures of Man. It's like, my goodness. Yeah, we've been going through some crazy directions. And I'm saying today, in this day and age, by pushing away books, pushing away reading from what we had done in the past, it's limited our skill set.
Let's talk, if you don't mind, Doc, let's talk a little bit about your scholarship in particular, because you've made a major contribution to the world of psychology and neuropsychology specifically. Talk to us a little bit about, your interest in your line of scholarship, which is, heavily based upon melanin.
Yeah, so trained to study the brain. I mean, I got a degree in physiological psychology. So studying hormones and behavior and how the brain is kind of producing behavior, and so all those topics excited me. Started out studying alcohol early, not so much drinking it, but looking at animals, what's going to happen to them. There's an ascending curve, people take their little drink and get a little buzz, but then the alcohol is really depressing. So what's happening physiologically? So I studied that at Howard. I also did some work with benzodiazepines. I don't know if you understand what that is, but that's like Valium.
Okay.
Benzodiazepines are anxiolytics. Anxiolytics, what's that? Anxiety reducing agents. They were the most widely prescribed drugs before all this Prozac and all these antidepressants came about.
Okay.
So in the lab, I had animals that were conditioned to be defeated, like they're scared after they get beat up. So that means you make losers and submissive animals. Interestingly, from a dissertation, I observed that if you give animals who are scared Valium, it's supposed to make them less stressed, they're more stressed. That's why you can't just give any drug to a person like it's going to be the same for all people. That's why this vaccine's a problem. That's why all drugs are a problem, because they think it's with one track dose for everybody, and that's not the case. That's why we have the blood pressure medicine problems. Mm-hmm. Black people should not be on ACE inhibitors, that is angiotensin converting enzyme. We should not be on those because of what we don't respond well to them, like lisinopril, things like that. I wrote a book, a little pamphlet called Sucker Punch Pamphlet.
Right, I was going to get to that. Yep.
So for me, it's been looking at the science and seeing that there's differences. Now you then lead in grad school reading Dr. Welsing's work, start to Start talking about the neurochemical basis of evil and start asking questions. Start people here talking about, well, melanin makes you build civilizations. Like, So trying to put all that together. And so let me just talk about the science of it. Let me kind of break it down, dispel those myths. Let me try to explain that there's some realities to what's being described, but what is the science behind this so-called pigment that's not just in our skin, our brains, eyes, nose. You think about the nasal passage. Let me say this first. You think about the nasal passage. A lot of people getting this coronavirus, sniffing, smelling. You got a lot of those ACE receptors where in the nose. That's why some people have what do you call it? Problems with smelling and tasting. The receptors up there in the nose. You got a lot of what? Melanin up there. Remember in Black Panther? It showed the dark. They had numbers there, but the melanin. You got melanin in your mouth and the gums, the oral area. So melanin is everywhere. And in the brain, you see it's present because if you have it absent, you got some movement problems.
That's right.
Rigidity, tremors, shaking, a disease called Parkinson's disease. So basically, we know it does something important. If you lack it, it's going to be a problem in the skin. You know, if you don't have it, you're going to get cancer. It tells it from what the sun's producing, which should be a friend, but becomes a solar radiated element that's going to potentially kill you. So that's why, you know, back in the day, people had to have been dark because we didn't have these clothes and stuff to put on us. We were like out there in the environment. Right. So those are the topics that led me to really want to explore, especially since I'm studying hormones. I'm studying now oxytocin, vasopressin. Perhaps you heard of them, but they're two hormones that come from the posterior pituitary gland. Oxytocin, perhaps you heard of it. A woman who's going to have a baby and is going into labor, that hormone kicks in to make that uterus contract, get the baby out. Even while she's not even delivering, but now she had the baby, she starts having milk release because of what the oxytocin going to the mammary glands that release the milk. Those are hormones. Guess what? Melanin could be a hormone. Don't you get dark when you're out there in the sun?
Yep.
So the same chemicals that are in the skin, also in the brain. One particular one, ACTH, stress hormone. So you're talking about stress hormones in the skin? To me, that then explains why we have like a more reserved way of experiencing things if we have more chemical elements being circulated. Stress could be also more differentially affecting people because of what different levels of the hormones. A lot of Black women who may be gaining a lot of weight have higher levels of cortisol, higher levels of those hormones like ghrelin and leptin and all those hormones that are like not regulating properly. Therefore, what? Stress causes those things to be triggered. The whole issue. You ever heard of telomeres?
Telomeres, no sir.
Telomeres. Telomeres are the ends of the chromosomes. When you get older, they shorten. They don't work as well anymore. Therefore, you age quicker. So the studies showing that Black men have higher levels of telomere shrinkage. And that comes from all these microaggressions and stuff. So you start thinking about stress itself having an impact. So we can handle stress, but it internally can maybe eat us up more so than others. We had our great professor still around, Jules Harrell, who's talked about psychophysiology for years. Right. You know, how what you see externally can then impact how your body's responding to things. And that's powerful research. So all that led to what John Henryism as a source of research, you know, how you try to work so hard to kind of overcompensate and do, and then guess what? Got all these blood pressure issues now, all these problems with your health, and melanin as a chemically composite chemical is absorbing things. So it's taking in over time, it can be problematic as it's absorbing all these toxic things to try to keep you healthy. You know, there's a lot of metals that are in the environment. So metals can absorb in your skin, it can absorb in your brain. And so Parkinson's doesn't happen at 3 years old, 8 or 10 years old. It happens when you're in your latter years of life, where all that toxicity over time.
It's accumulated.
Yeah, that's why I say you don't die of natural causes. You die toxicity over time.
Look, if you mentioned stress, and I just wanted to put this out there real quick. Ron F. Amen, the author of the Medu Netters, volumes 1 through like 900. I see them two on your shelf.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's it's amazing because how easy it is to identify some of our classics, right? We know them by the spine.
Right.
Like I know Yurugu by the spine up there. I could read off several books on yourself. I see the books. I think there's Gerald Massey behind you, if I'm not mistaken. You got 3 volumes of him right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, and so this is Ron F. Man, stress-free for life, and this is what he's talking about. He deals a little bit with the neural, but he comes more from the psycho-spiritual aspect of it, and how shifting our understanding of reality to better accommodate ourselves, and to protect ourselves against some, like you said, these microaggressions that do exist.
And it's powerful. I was 2 years ago in Seattle, presented the conference Ancestral Healing, and Robert Nefer was there. Baba Wade Nobles and Baba Charles Finch, myself, presented in the conference. Wow. So it was a pleasure to be in his presence.
Major. I actually introduced Ron F. Man to Dr. Wells and Mr. Fuller for the first time. So if you ever see a picture of those 3 floating around the internet, that's my picture. I've been trying to get my copyright claims, but
you got a powerful role to play, man, because I had never met Wayne Chandler, but I wrote the credits on the back of his book, and I didn't meet him till you had an organization or you had an event at Fisk University, and we crossed paths then. So I appreciate you for doing that too.
Man, it's much love, my brother. I remember that event. It was the Harambe conference, and you were there, Ron F. Men, Laila Africa, Dr. Welson, Mr. Fuller, Coach Powell. That's actually L.A. Banks. She was, man, our beautiful sister, L.A. Banks, man. Wayne Chandler introduced me to Yasir and L.A. Banks. Yasir was having an event at the House of Hotep, which is his house up in Chicago, he uses as a yoga studio. And Wayne and I were talking about children's books that I was putting together. And he was saying that he had met this sister who ends up being L.A. Banks, met this sister who was also did a graphic novel or whatever. She had an illustrator, and he thought it would be a good idea for me to come on up to Chicago so I could meet her. And I was like, well, I don't know you. So I'll call him, blah, blah, blah. He hooked it up. I went to Chicago, and that's how I actually met our sister, L.A. Banks, man. And that weekend we did at Fisk, that was separate from the Harambe conference, actually. That was something I did with the Health and Wellness organization. And oh, man, those times, brother, and our ability to just really break bread and connect on those levels, man, I yearn for those days again.
Yeah, so that's why your question earlier about, I think, organization or collectively working together. Again, there are some people who have the knack and the vehicles to make it work. So I'm pushing you on what you've done in the past to continue. L.A. Banks, she's no longer with us. She was just she made it big. She wrote an article in Essence magazine, and from there took off her work, and now she had a whole series on the Vampire Huntress series. You start doing the vampire stuff on TV. Think about how much money maybe she could have made if she was still here, because they pirating off of her stuff.
Big time.
So there has to be some people in place. I was at a FAMU the year before Dr. Wilson passed, and they had a conference at the African Black Psychology Conference in honor of her work. She sat up front, heard all the presentations. She says the best conference she ever went to, because she saw what people applying her work. So just the organization, like FAMU, First Black, I think they got the only master's program in Black psychology.
Yep.
So people have put in the work, and I'm just saying, why don't we continue to support the work? That's what the challenge is. I just finished my class reunion, and people that have not supported as well as they could to fund the institution. I mean, if we don't put the money in, how do we grow? So it comes down to us, again, loving ourselves first. Once you love yourself, then you're gonna support your stuff. As Dr. John Clark used to always say, look in the mirror first. You don't love that person, then you ain't loving nobody.
Right, you're in trouble. Well, tell me a little bit, brother, about that Sucker Punch article, man, because that was a pretty heavy piece.
Yeah, so the whole connection into the melanin component for me is that Black people have been suffering because people have been the medical establishment has not looked at them as equal. They haven't looked at them as anything. It's just people. So when you start looking at medications that have been given us, I know you have Harriet Washington's book.
Medical Apartheid.
one of my favorite writers. She also wrote a book called Deadly Monopolies. And Deadly Monopolies, talking about the whole the pharmaceutical industry. And so for me, knowing that the people who are dying from this COVID have pre-existing conditions, how do you get that? You get that maybe from getting synthetic medications, but over years. So it's like, here, take this Celebrex. Here, take this Vioxx. Here, take this Lisinopril. And so Vioxx, Vioxx, perhaps you heard of it, maybe not. It's arthritis medicine. Merck Sharp and Dohme. Guess what? It was giving people strokes. They knew that. Had to take it off the market. Vioxx, Celebrex. I think that was another product that another company made, this anti-arthritis medicine. Well, I know I took a juice called Zango. Morinda citrifolia is a little like berry. It helped me. Some people doing noni juice in the past. There's natural elements out there. So for the years, pushing all these drugs, pushing all these drugs, keep taking the drugs, and now people are sick. People are getting mostly impacted, have cardiovascular issues and diabetes, cholesterol issues. I mean, so all those, even though they're saying now Lipitor, the one people use
cholesterol.
They say that it is helpful or beneficial for those people who have COVID to help fight against it. Whatever. Either way, all these synthetic chemicals have been, putting out there, and now comes the coronavirus, pow, knocking people out. And so I'm saying, if you don't pay attention to what you're putting in your body, you're going to get taken out. Right. I saw a medical doctor, Black woman, who's like, oh yeah, I got shot. I really felt sick. I was bad. I'm telling you to take it. She said, I really felt, ill and this, and she's all saying all this. And then in the midst of it, because some people just lose their appetite, don't want to eat. It's got really the flu. That's like a real serious problem. The first meal she goes out to get Chick-fil-A. I'm saying that's the medical establishment, people who really don't know what you're putting in your body, and that's why you're sick. Right. So the fast food merchants are really merchants of death. Hey, fast food is quick death. And so the sucker punch component deals with the fact that, we've been hyped up for so long about taking all these drugs. Now we're hyped up about this medication, this vaccine. And bottom line is, it's not a treatment. It's not a cure. You don't really die from it unless you got these pre-existing conditions. That's why I'm saying people got to look at what they're putting in the body. And that's why I'm saying it's not really a defense mechanism. It's not really an immune system. It's a defense mechanism system. You know as well as I do. You get a cold. I don't know, do common colds exist anymore, or is it only coronavirus?
Let them tell it.
Yeah, is there still other diseases out there? So this is the only one that we're talking about. So the cold virus, if you felt like you were catching a cold in the past before all this corona stuff came up, I took some echinacea, some golden seal root, the vitamin C.
I popped some zinc.
I feel I'm back. So no one's pushing that. All they're saying vaccine. Merck Sharp and Dohme pulled out of the race. In January, we're not done with that vaccine stuff. We're gonna make a drug. Read the literature. Johnson & Johnson said, okay, we're gonna make a drug. Johnson & Johnson, they make talcum powder. They gave Black people cancer in the past, in the history of that. They made cotton balls. What you know about vaccines? So the government asked Merck Sharp and Dohme to help them out. So that's why I got that one-shot vaccine that came out. So when we talk about the melanin component, again, melanin is like an antiviral agent. It can fight those types of things. So if you take care of your body right, take care of your melanin right, guess what? You have much more strength to fight all these, because this is not going to be the last virus to come across. There's going to be many more elements out there.
Let me ask you this, Doc, because you said the melanin has an immune function. Is it its absorption power? Is that what it's about?
Let's look at how macrophages work when you get a foreign element in your body. These chemicals come around, this foreign element come around to grab it out and neutralize it. And other chemicals are coming out to, then get rid of it. So if you look at melanin in that capacity, it's like an antiviral, antifungal agent. I mean, think about when you see nuclear power plants that are decimated and nothing's going on there, but mold develops, black mold. It can survive in those kind of environments. So in your body, it's serving in that capacity to keep out toxicity. So yes, that's how it serves. Not
so
just.
When you emphasize black mold, is that melanin?
Yeah, It's dark. Yeah, I mean, you take a bite of that apple or that banana, put it out on their table. What's going to happen?
It starts to browning.
That's melanin. It's everywhere. It's protection.
So instead of even the rat was white, even the mold is black, huh?
Yeah, you can say it, you can put it that way. Absolutely. So that's why I'm saying that we don't know our bodies, and if we're waiting on someone else to tell us. I mean, I sat in medical school classes at Howard University, where you were also, and I sat in the classes, the white professors telling these future black doctors, oh, that's the pineal gland. Don't worry about that. It doesn't do much. And went on to the next topic. And that was the 1990s. Mm-hmm. Now we know since 58, it reduces melatonin. Why are you going to tell these doctors that? And now you got the coronavirus situation now, people saying that melatonin can be helpful for some people. It could be an immune booster. Wow. So all I'm saying is that we have to study our bodies. We have to know ourselves. We don't know ourselves. Someone else will dictate and control you.
Good brother. I respect, appreciate, and love you to life, man. Continue to endarken. I know you got your tennis tournament or something coming up.
Yes, sir.
That's what I'm saying. This brother's so phenomenal, y'all. I'm not just blowing smoke. This is my true to life brother. And he's so phenomenal that he's taking time out of his busy schedule. He's joining us today and literally headed to go crack some heads on that tennis court. Because I don't know how you do it, but please one day show me where that fountain of youth is, man, so I can get me a sip.
On the mind.
On the mind. Yeah. All right. So hopefully the ancestral legacies. Hopefully I will get there to Kemet. That's my intention to get there this summer with Brother Yasir. Hopefully you'll be there again. I hate that I missed the trip with you. But continue to go hard, man, and do the work and continue to enlighten those of us that are willing to listen.
Peace, my brother. Thank you for this opportunity. And again, your platform is awesome.
All right, real quick, people want to find your books, your website, give us all of that so they can get a hold to those texts. www.drtmore.com. That's the simplest way. Okay, www.drtmore.com. That's more with 2 O's, MOORE.
Yes.
.com. Got you covered. All right, much love, good brother. I'll talk to you real soon, man.
Peace, my brother.
All right, much love. All right, y'all. So this is the third of 4 panels where we are talking about Black Minds Matter. We're looking at mental health awareness from various perspectives. Today's conversation is about scholarship. I got so many more books that I wanted to show, but of course, it's limited time. But just what I will do is show just a couple of more. One book that I end up having to pay a pretty penny for is this book called Jung in Africa. Yeah, and of course, he's not an African scholar, but he is a European psychiatrist who studied African spirituality and African concepts. And he said that he couldn't consider himself whatever to use the term healer or witch doctor something until he studied amongst the masters in Africa. And so when I heard him say that in this documentary, I had to find that book. I paid over $100-something for that book, and it's not an old book. I mean, it's relatively new. And what the book did was it opened my understanding of how many people, even in the Western model, stand on the shoulders of African concepts and African spirituality. This whole field of African and Black psychology becomes necessary because we have been cut out of the mainstream literature. The further back you go in European literature, the more likely you are to hear mention of Africa and African spirituality and the great African teachers. It's more in the quote unquote modern times. And if you look up the word modern, literally, it refers to it's a political definition that refers to the 15th century onward. And Dr. Moore, he mentioned the Dark Ages, right? And coming out into Enlightenment. And so when you look at that political designation of modern, then what you understand is that there's something called ancient that came before the modern. And when you look at those ancient scholars, they always point back to their teachers who often and invariably are African scholars. And so we've got to keep our hands on this, and we got to keep our eyes on the prize. And we mentioned Dr. Wilson a lot. And one thing that Dr. Wilson does in almost all his works is he put everything in a historical context. And even in the world of psychology, there is historical context for what we're doing. We are actually we're actually attempting to heal ourselves and others by reorienting ourselves, by becoming more in touch with our true, as Dr. Moore said, cosmic selves. We have to understand that energy is neither created nor destroyed, it just changes forms. And so I think that we are simultaneously those ancestors that were waiting for us and those waiting ancestors, right? Meaning that, we are simultaneously those that the ancestors were waiting for and those waiting ancestors, meaning that we get these opportunities, like I said, with the time in that spiral fashion to come back around and correct course. to come back around and set things back in order, to come back around and make sure that we are living this time around better than we did in the previous times. Without our proper worldview and orientation, it becomes difficult. And so it's very important for those of you who have thoughts and ideas and these concepts for you to go ahead and begin to produce things, for you to go ahead and literally contribute to what it is that we have to pick from, those things that we have to cite as scholarship, as valuable pieces of information, because if we don't do it, nobody else will. It's literally the challenging of a paradigm. There's a book by Thomas Kuhn called The Structure of Scientific Revolution. And he talks about the paradigm, and he talks about creating paradigm shifts. And he talks about this thing called an anomaly. And an anomaly shows up in a paradigm. An anomaly is something that differs from what exists. And the paradigm is what exists. And so the anomaly shows up and it threatens the paradigm's existence. And so there's three ways that the anomaly and the paradigm interact with each other. One, the paradigm gets rid of the anomaly. However that happens, it destroys it, whatever it does, it gets rid of the anomaly, it destroys it, it absorbs it into itself, whatever. Then the paradigm can also shift and expand to incorporate the anomaly. So if the anomaly was 2 feet to the right, then the paradigm will shift and incorporate 2 feet to the right. And now the anomaly is a part of the paradigm. And then there are other ways that the anomaly can actually destroy the paradigm as it exists, and therefore creating an entire new way of experience and reality. And so this is what we're literally dealing with here, is how to engage the existing paradigm and as anomalies, meaning as bodies of literature, scholarly thought, clinical practice as far as it relates to psychology, because we are literally talking about how do we define health and wellness, right? On a mental level, what do we mean by psychological well-being? If you've got people who themselves are sick telling you that their sickness is actually the normal healthy, and you have them criticizing your normal healthy as being sick, and if they have the power and the control to define and to put the consequences and implement the protocols and procedures for addressing illness and wellness, then what you're in a perpetually losing state. That's really how important this conversation is today. And so I know you've seen a lot of books, you've heard a lot of titles and names getting dropped, and it wasn't ego. This was a crash course in some of the most important and valuable literature that you can embrace if you're seeking to understand better African and Black psychology. And we didn't even begin to scratch the surface. I mean, I know y'all could just throw out hundreds of names that we haven't even mentioned. You could put concepts out there that we didn't even get close to. I mean, I know brothers and sisters out there that are masterful at this, well beyond my ability. And I pay homage to you all. So all I say is that when you get a chance to come back around and look at this video, those of you that are watching this video, those of you that will engage in conversations around this video, whatever platform you're seeing it on, go ahead and put in the comments more literature, more books that we may not have mentioned, more scholars that we may not have mentioned, more concepts that we may not have mentioned, because this is an ongoing process. And the last thing that I'll say before we close, I want to give thanks to Morgan State University, our president, Dr. David Wilson, the director of the Institute for Urban Research, Dr. Raymond A. Wimbush, who is also one of the Black psychology scholars. He has the book called The Warrior Method. He has Belinda's Petition, as well as his reader or his compilation of Should America Pay? So these are the people that come before us, and without their blessing and the green lighting of this particular platform, it wouldn't be taking place in this way. So I want to give shout out to Morgan State University and the Institute for Urban Research. The fourth and final panel for Mental Health Awareness Month will take place on Monday the 31st, the last day of the month. I'll be joined by my other Howard Bison, Dr. Afia, and Billy Shaka. She is the founder of the concept of psychotherapy. She and at least one other person will be joining us for this conversation, where we're talking about destigmatizing the whole concept of seeking mental health, seeking help to establish and maintain mental health. So we're talking about destigmatization. I want to give a real quick shout out to Tracy Jade and Taraji P. Henson. They have been nominated for a talk show that they were doing on Facebook. She has the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, and they're doing phenomenal work as far as destigmatizing mental illness and the seeking of mental health services. So shout out to you all. And I'll see you all on next Monday. Please spread the word. It will be the same Zoom meeting ID link. Spread the word. I had a flyer done sooner than later. And this one, as well as last week's, will be uploaded to YouTube. And you can find that on Mind on the Matter, one word, Mind on the Matter YouTube channel. All right. Much love and respect to you all. And thank you again for joining us. I'll talk to you all next Monday.